The country club dining room sparkled with crystal and silver. 60 guests in business casual attire filled the private event space Mom had reserved for her 55th birthday. I sat at the family table wearing my usual outfit: jeans, a simple blouse, comfortable flats. Dad sat at the head in his custom suit, talking loudly about his latest government contract. "Rachel's still doing her little freelance thing," Mom explained to Aunt Susan, her voice apologetic. "We keep hoping she'll get a real job, but you know how stubborn she can be." I was 32 years old. I'd been doing my little freelance thing for 9 years. Nobody at this table had ever asked what that actually meant. "Still no boyfriend?" Aunt Susan asked, eyebrows raised in that concerned way that wasn't concern at all. "No," I said simply. "Such a shame," she sighed. "Your cousin Jennifer just got engaged to a cardiologist." Dad's business partner, Richard Morrison, arrived with his wife. Dad stood immediately, shaking hands, all smiles and backslapping energy. Richard ran Morrison Development. They'd worked on 6 major projects together over the past decade. "Tom, happy birthday to the lovely lady," Richard boomed. "How's the wife?" "Tolerating me for another year," Dad laughed. They sat down and immediately the conversation turned to business. It always did. "The Harbor District project is gold, Tom," Richard said, accepting a whiskey from the waiter. 14-story mixed use, city's fast-tracking permits. We break ground in April. "Already got the steel supplier locked in," Dad said proudly. "Peterson Construction Group doesn't waste time." I ate my salad quietly, listening. "Rachel." Richard noticed me suddenly. "Still doing that computer thing?" "Yes," I said. "Web design, right?" he asked, trying to remember. "Something like that." Dad snorted. "She's been building her portfolio for almost a decade now. We've offered her a job in our office multiple times. Receptionist, filing clerk, even offered to train her for project coordination. But no, she wants to be an entrepreneur." He made air quotes. Richard smiled uncomfortably. "Well, the gig economy is popular with young people these days." "She's 32, Mom said quietly. "Not exactly young anymore." The appetizers arrived. Seared scallops, prosciutto-wrapped asparagus, artisan breads. I ate slowly, checking my phone under the table. 3 notifications from my business manager. 2 from my accountant. 1 from my attorney. I silenced them all. "Tom, I wanted to ask," Richard said, leaning forward. "Who's your angel investor on the Harbor project? The funding came through so smoothly." Dad smiled mysteriously. "Can't reveal all my secrets, Rick. Let's just say I've got connections that believe in Peterson quality." I took a sip of water. "Must be someone with deep pockets," Richard pressed. "That's an $8 million investment for your share of the equity." $8.3 million actually, Dad corrected. "And yes, very deep pockets. Very confident in my track record." Mom beamed. "Tom's built this company from nothing. 30 years of blood and sweat." 28 years, I said quietly. Dad shot me a look. "Excuse me. You started Peterson Construction 28 years ago. In 1997. I remember because I was 4 years old and you missed my birthday party for the business license appointment." Silence fell over the table. "Well," Dad said tightly, "some of us were building actual businesses instead of celebrating preschool parties." The main course arrived. Filet mignon, lobster tail, roasted vegetables that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. I cut my steak into small, precise pieces. "Rachel, honey," Mom started, her voice syrupy. "Your father and I have been talking. We really think it's time you considered something more stable. Richard's daughter works in pharmaceutical sales." "I'm not interested in pharmaceutical sales." "You're not interested in anything that requires real work," Dad muttered. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "What was that?" He looked directly at me. "You heard me. 9 years of pretending to run a business. 9 years of living in that tiny apartment, driving that embarrassing car, wearing clothes from Target. When are you going to grow up and join the real world?" "Tom," Mom said quietly but without conviction. "No, Helen. She needs to hear this." Dad turned to Richard. "My daughter couldn't build a sandcastle, much less a business. We've been patient. We've been supportive. But there comes a time when you have to face facts." Richard shifted uncomfortably. His wife studied her wine glass. I set down my fork, pulled out my phone, opened my encrypted messaging app, typed carefully, Marcus, sell all shares in Peterson Construction Group. Effective immediately. File the paperwork tonight. I hit send. Then I looked up at my father. Are you finished? Finished. He laughed. Rachel, I'm trying to help you. You're 32 with no career, no prospects, no future. At some point you need to accept that entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. Some people are meant to work for others, not lead. I stood up. Thank you for the lovely dinner, Mom. Happy birthday. Where are you going? Mom asked, startled. Home. I have work to do. On a Saturday night? Dad scoffed. What work? Updating your LinkedIn profile. I picked up my purse. Something like that. I walked out of the country club while 60 people watched. I heard Dad laugh as the door closed behind me. Sensitive, he said loudly. Always has been. I didn't cry in my car. I'd stopped crying about my father's opinion when I was 19, and he told me that business school would be wasted on someone who thinks with emotions instead of logic. I'd proven him wrong by getting my MBA with honors while working full-time. He'd skipped my graduation because of a client meeting. What he didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was that the little freelance thing I'd been doing for 9 years had evolved into something much bigger. It started simply enough. I was 23, fresh out of business school, working as a financial analyst for a venture capital firm. I was good at pattern recognition, seeing which startups had real potential versus which ones were burning through investor money with no viable path to profitability. My boss, Marcus Chin, noticed. You've got instincts, Rachel. You see things 6 months before they happen. I just pay attention, I said. Most people don't. Most people hear a good pitch and fall in love with the vision. You look at the actual numbers. Marcus became my mentor. When I was 25, he helped me make my first angel investment, $50,000 into a small logistics software company that nobody else believed in. 18 months later, it was acquired for $12 million. My return, $480,000. I reinvested everything. By the time I was 28, I'd built a portfolio worth $11 million. By 30, it was $37 million. Now, at 32, my private investment portfolio was worth just over $193 million. And nobody in my family had any idea. They saw my $1,200 a month apartment in a decent neighborhood. They saw my 7-year-old Honda Civic. They saw my Target clothes and my absence from social media and my quiet, boring life. They didn't see the 18 companies I had stakes in. They didn't see the commercial real estate portfolio. They didn't see the municipal bonds, the index funds, the carefully diversified assets that generated passive income of roughly $400,000 per month. They didn't see any of it because I'd made sure they wouldn't. When I was 26, Dad had asked to borrow $20,000 for what he called a temporary cash flow issue with Peterson Construction. I was dating someone at the time. Marcus had warned me against mixing family and money, but I'd ignored him. I gave Dad the money. He never paid it back. When I asked about it 6 months later, he laughed. Consider it rent for all those years we raised you. That's how family works, Rachel. That's when I learned my lesson. Family would take everything if you let them. Love and exploitation could coexist perfectly in the same relationship. So I built my empire in complete silence. The Target clothes. I actually owned a penthouse in the city, but I kept my cheap apartment for family visits. The Honda Civic. I also had a Tesla in a private garage downtown, but I drove the Honda to family events. The freelance work? I did maintain a small web design consultancy as a cover. It made about $60,000 a year and gave me a plausible explanation for my lifestyle. Everything else was invisible, including my investment in my father's company. 3 years ago, Dad had been in trouble. Peterson Construction Group had overextended on 2 major projects. Suppliers were threatening to pull out. Contractors were walking. The company was 45 days from bankruptcy. I found out through Richard Morrison, of all people. We'd run into each other at a coffee shop downtown. He'd looked terrible, stressed, exhausted. Your dad's in a tough spot, he'd said carefully. I don't know if you know. I don't. He needs a capital injection. $8.3 million to be exact. If he doesn't get it, Peterson Construction folds. I'd sipped my coffee. That's unfortunate. I thought maybe your family might have resources. I'd almost laughed. My family thought I could barely afford my rent. I don't think I can help, I'd said. But I could. And despite everything, despite the dismissals, the mockery, the contempt, I did. I created a shell investment company called Cascade Capital Holdings. It had no obvious connection to me. The paperwork ran through 3 layers of LLCs with my attorney as the registered agent. I approached Dad's company through Marcus, who presented it as a client looking for a strategic investment in mid-sized construction firms. Dad never knew it was me. Cascade Capital Holdings invested $8.3 million in Peterson Construction Group in exchange for 51% ownership of the company. 51%. Controlling interest. My father had been so desperate, so grateful for the lifeline, that he'd signed everything Marcus put in front of him. He thought he was getting a silent partner who'd let him run the company however he wanted. He thought wrong. The contract was very specific. As majority shareholder, Cascade Capital Holdings had the right to remove and replace executive management. Approve or reject any contract over $500,000. Sell the company without founder approval. Liquidate assets to recover investment. But there was a clause Dad particularly loved. The silent partner provision. As long as the company remained profitable and met quarterly benchmarks, Cascade Capital would remain completely hands-off. Dad could run his company exactly as he always had. For 3 years, Peterson Construction thrived. They landed government contracts, won competitive bids, expanded into 3 new states. Dad thought it was all his genius business acumen. It wasn't. It was me. Every major contract Peterson Construction won, I'd quietly ensured they were positioned perfectly. When they bid on the Harbor District project, I'd made sure their primary competitor had unexpected permit delays. When they needed bonding for a state highway project, I'd had my people smooth the way with the bonding company. I wasn't helping my father. I was protecting my investment. But I'd also kept a very important fail-safe. The right to sell my shares at any time for any reason with 60 days notice. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Marcus. It's done, he said. Paperwork filed. Official notice delivered to Peterson Construction's registered office. You're out. Who's buying? Hendricks Development Group. They're paying 92 cents on the dollar for immediate close. You'll clear $7.6 million profit after taxes and fees. I was sitting in my real apartment, the penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Wine glass in hand. Completely calm. What about the Harbor District project? I asked. Without your capital backing, Peterson Construction doesn't have the equity to qualify. Hendricks will likely take over the contract directly. Your father's company will lose the project. And the ripple effects? Marcus paused. Rachel, are you sure about this? Answer the question. Peterson Construction will lose credibility with their bonding company. 3 other projects will likely go into review. If banks get nervous, they might call his operating line. Worst case scenario, he's looking at significant financial restructuring. Possible bankruptcy if he can't find replacement capital fast. Good. Rachel. He called me a failure in front of 60 people, Marcus. He spent 32 years making sure I know how worthless he thinks I am. I gave him 3 years of success he didn't earn. That's generous enough. Understood, Marcus said quietly. The Hendricks deal closes Tuesday. Transition period is 60 days. After that, you have no financial connection to Peterson Construction. Perfect. We hung up. I finished my wine and went to bed. I slept perfectly. Sunday passed quietly. I worked on actual freelance projects. The web design cover had to remain believable. I updated 3 client websites, sent invoices, responded to emails. Normal, boring, low-income work that kept my cover intact. Dad didn't call. Mom didn't call. They never did after our arguments. They'd wait for me to apologize for being sensitive or overreacting. I'd learned to wait them out. Sometimes we'd go weeks without speaking. Monday morning I went to the gym. Had coffee at my favorite cafe. Worked from home on my laptop like always. At 2:37 p.m. my phone exploded. First call, Dad. I didn't answer. Second call, Dad again. Declined. Third call, Mom. Declined. Fourth call, Richard Morrison. That one I answered. Rachel, he said, voice tight. I need you to tell me something. And I need you to be completely honest. Okay. Do you know anything about Cascade Capital Holdings? My heart rate didn't change. Never heard of them. Why? They're selling their stake in your father's company. Effective immediately. Tom just got the notice this morning. The buyer is Hendrix Development. They're his primary competitor. This is going to destroy him. I don't understand why you're calling me, Richard. Because this doesn't make sense. Cascade invested 3 years ago and the company's been performing beautifully. There's no logical reason to sell now unless... He stopped. Unless what? Unless someone wanted to punish Tom for something. I let the silence stretch. Rachel, Richard said carefully. Where do you work? I'm a freelance web designer. You know this. No, I mean really. What do you really do? I build websites for small businesses. I make about $60,000 a year. I live in a tiny apartment and drive a Honda Civic. You've seen my life, Richard. I've seen what you've shown us, he said quietly. I don't know what you're implying. Your father's company is about to collapse, Rachel. The Harbor District project is gone. 3 other contracts are in jeopardy. If the banks panic, he could lose everything. The company, the house, his reputation. Is that what you want? What I want, I said calmly, is for people to stop calling me a failure. Silence. Oh God, Richard breathed. It was you. I don't know what you're talking about. The investment. The timing. 3 years ago, right after Tom talked about needing capital. The amount, $8.3 million, the exact number. Rachel, what did you do? I didn't do anything, Richard. I'm just a freelance web designer who couldn't build a sandcastle, remember? I hung up. 30 seconds later, Dad called. I answered this time. What did you do? He screamed. No greeting. No preamble. Hello, Dad. How are you? Don't play games with me. Cascade Capital is selling. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what you've done? I genuinely don't know what you're talking about. Richard says it was you. Richard's mistaken. I'm a broke freelancer, remember? I couldn't possibly have $8.3 million to invest in construction companies. This isn't funny, Rachel. You're right. It's not. My voice went cold. What's funny is spending 3 years believing a mysterious investor saved your company out of pure faith in your abilities. What's funny is never once questioning who would give you that much money. What's funny is calling your own daughter a failure while she literally owns the majority of your business. Dead silence. What? His voice barely a whisper. Cascade Capital Holdings, Dad. Incorporated in Delaware, 3 layers of LLCs, registered agent in Nevada. 51% ownership of Peterson Construction Group, purchased on August 14, 3 years ago for $8.3 million. That was me. I heard him sit down. Heard the chair creak. That's not possible. I have the contracts, signed by you, notarized, filed with the state. Every major decision you've made for 3 years required my approval. You just didn't know it because as long as you hit your benchmarks, I stayed silent. Rachel. His voice broke. Why? Because you were going bankrupt and you're still my father. Because despite everything you've said and done, I didn't want to watch you lose everything. Because I'm not actually a failure. I'm just very good at making you think I am. Then why sell now? Why destroy everything? I'm not destroying anything. Hendrix Development is a good company. They'll honor your contracts, keep your employees, probably even let you stay on as a consultant if you're humble enough to ask. You'll be fine. The Harbor District project is gone. You don't have the equity to qualify anymore. Hendrix will take it over. You'll lose about 40% of your projected revenue for next year. That will ruin us. No, I said calmly. It will humble you. There's a difference. Rachel, please. We can fix this. I'll apologize. You called me a failure in front of 60 people, Dad. You've spent my entire life making sure I know how little you think of me. I gave you 3 years. I made you successful. I protected every contract, smoothed every deal, made sure you looked like a genius when really you were just lucky enough to have a daughter you underestimated. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. You never asked about my work. You never asked about my life. You just assumed I was failing because that fit your narrative better. Tell me what you want. Money. An apology? What? I don't want anything from you anymore, Dad. That's the point. Rachel. The sale closes Tuesday. After 60 days, I have no connection to your company. What you do after that is your problem. Maybe Richard will invest. Maybe you'll find another mysterious benefactor. Maybe you'll actually have to build something yourself instead of coasting on other people's money. You can't do this. I already did. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up. He called back immediately. I blocked his number. Mom called. Walked. Richard called. Walked. Tuesday morning the sale closed. Hendricks Development Group acquired 51% of Peterson Construction Group for $15.9 million. After fees and taxes, I walked away with $7.6 million profit. Combined with my other investments, my portfolio was now worth just over $200 million. I celebrated by getting a mani-pedi and buying groceries at Trader Joe's. Wednesday the industry news broke. Hendricks Development acquires controlling stake in Peterson Construction, ran in the business section. The article mentioned that Tom Peterson would stay on as senior advisor, but that day-to-day operations would transition to Hendricks management. Translation: Dad was functionally demoted in his own company. Thursday I got an email from Mom. Subject line, please. I deleted it without reading. Friday morning someone knocked on my apartment door, the cheap apartment I kept as a cover. I opened it to find Dad standing there. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 days. Unshaven. Rumpled suit. Exhausted eyes. How did you find this address? I asked. Your mother's had it for years. Can I come in? I considered, then stepped aside. He entered slowly, looking around at my tiny studio apartment. At my IKEA furniture and my clearance rack decorations and my life that looked exactly like what a struggling freelancer could afford. Is this real? He asked quietly. Or is this part of the disguise too? Both. I keep this place for family visits. My actual apartment is downtown. He nodded slowly. Sat on my cheap couch. Put his head in his hands. I lost the Harbor District project, he said. Hendricks is taking it over. 3 other contracts are under review. The bank called my operating line for audit. Richard's barely speaking to me because I apparently dragged him into a mess I created myself. I know. Your mother is devastated. She can't understand why you'd hurt us like this. I didn't hurt you. I stopped helping you. There's a difference. He looked up. Is there? Yes. For 3 years I propped up a company that should have failed. I gave you success you didn't earn. I made you look competent when you were actually drowning. The only thing I did wrong was letting you believe you did it yourself. Why didn't you tell me? I sat across from him. When would I have told you, Dad? At Sunday dinner when you mocked my career? At Christmas when you gave Mom a diamond bracelet and me a gift card to Target? At Mom's birthday when you announced to your business partners that I couldn't build a sandcastle? He flinched. You never wanted to know the truth, I continued. You wanted me to be a failure because it made you feel successful by comparison. You needed me to be less than you. That's not true. It's completely true. And here's the thing, Dad, I don't even blame you anymore. I did for a long time, but now I just feel sad. Because you wasted 32 years dismissing someone who could have been your greatest asset. Rachel. I'm worth $200 million. I said it calmly, watching his face. Give or take. My investment portfolio spans 18 companies, 4 real estate holdings, and a diversified asset base that generates roughly $400,000 a month in passive income. I've been building this for 9 years while you thought I was designing websites in my spare bedroom. He stared at me like I was speaking another language. I have an MBA from Stanford. I worked for Marcus Chin at Apex Venture Capital for 4 years before going independent. I've been featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 for finance. I sit on 3 corporate boards. Last year, I donated $1.2 million to charity anonymously. How? He whispered. By being smart. By working hard. By learning from people who actually knew what they were doing instead of pretending I already knew everything. Why hide it? Because of what happened when I gave you $20,000 when I was 26. You never paid me back. You said family doesn't keep score. That's when I learned that you would take everything I had if I let you. He closed his eyes. So I built an empire you couldn't touch, I said. I became the thing you always told me I couldn't be. And I did it so quietly, so carefully that you never even suspected. What happens now? He asked. Now. You figure out how to run your company with actual oversight. Hendrix is fair, but they're not pushovers. You'll have to justify every decision, prove every expense, earn every contract. It'll be the hardest work you've ever done. And us. Our family. I thought about it. Really thought. I don't know, Dad. That depends on whether you can see me as something other than a disappointment. Whether you can acknowledge that I'm not who you thought I was. Whether you can respect me. I do respect you. No, you don't. Not yet. But maybe someday you will. He stood slowly. Rachel, I'm sorry. For all of it. For every dismissive comment, for every time I made you feel small, for never asking about your real life. I'm sorry. I appreciate that, I said. And I did. It was the first genuine apology he'd ever given me. Can I tell your mother? About your success? No. His face fell. If she wants to know about my life, she can ask me directly. She can treat me like a person worth knowing instead of a problem to be fixed. When she's ready to do that, I'll tell her everything. Until then, I'm just the freelance web designer who couldn't build a sandcastle. He nodded. Moved toward the door. Paused. You really own a penthouse downtown? With a view of the river. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Marble countertops. 2,000 square feet of everything you thought I'd never achieve. Can I see it? Someday. When you've earned it. He left quietly. I locked the door behind him and sat in my tiny apartment that I didn't need anymore but kept anyway, because sometimes the best disguise is the truth everyone already believes. Epilogue 6 months later. Peterson Construction stabilized under Hendrix management. Dad kept his senior advisor role, but his ego took a permanent hit. He was no longer the undisputed king of his own empire. Now he had to collaborate, compromise, and occasionally admit he was wrong. It was good for him. Mom eventually called. We met for coffee at a neutral location. She cried. She apologized. She asked why I'd never told her. Biz, you never asked, Mom. Neither of you ever asked. Richard Morrison became an unexpected ally. He figured out the truth completely, and instead of being angry, he was impressed. You played the long game, he said. Respect. We ended up collaborating on 2 investment projects. Turns out we work well together. Marcus Chin laughed when I told him the full story. I told you not to mix family and money, he reminded me. I didn't mix them. I completely separated them. That was the point. My portfolio hit $220 million in March. I still drive the Honda Civic to family events. I still keep the cheap apartment. I still do freelance web design to maintain the cover. But now, when Dad introduces me to his business partners, he says something different. This is my daughter, Rachel. She's in finance. It's not the whole truth. But it's a start. And sometimes that's enough.